Yes. Okay, great to have everybody on today. Today is the monthly 30th session that we have every month, open to the public, free, worldwide, about anything, any questions related to the afterlife or reincarnation or soul groups, soul plans, whatever. Anything related to afterlife stuff is what this session is about. And it's monthly, every 30th of every month. That's why I call it the Afterlife 30th monthly Q&A. So that way you know it's the 30th, whatever day of the week that is, it happens to be. And I have it at the same time every month. It's at 12 noon Pacific time. I'm in California, in Los Angeles. So 12 Pacific, figure out the time zones and so forth, 3 on the eastern seaboard of the US, 8 p.m. in the UK and so forth. So today we have a guest who's going to help me. He was here with us last month, if you saw those sessions. By the way, if you miss any of these sessions, first of all, I send you the link. Those people who are registered are on my email list, and you'll get the link to the recording of each of these sessions. You can watch them again or whatever. If you come and go, if you only catch half of it or, as part of it, you can always catch up and watch the rest of it, etc. But they're also in 2 other public places. You can always find recordings of these sessions. You can either find them on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search for my name in YouTube. But the actual name, if you want to plug it in to bring you right to my channel, it's called Kelvin Chin Turning Within. So Kelvin Chin Turning Within is the name of my YouTube channel. And there's 9 playlists on my YouTube channel. And one of the playlists is called this session. It's called 30th Monthly Afterlife Q&A, something like that. Anyway, that's the name of the playlist. So obviously all of the recordings starting that when I started doing this last November, I started doing this on November 30th last year, which was the 9th anniversary of that 30th November talk that we did in 2014. And every month since then. So all those are there. The other place that these recordings are all publicly available are on my website, kelvinchin.org, that website. I have 4 websites. You can go to that one website and access all the other ones. You don't have to remember all the names of the other ones. But I have a meditation website. I have an Overcoming the Fear of Death website. And I got my book website. So you go to kelvinchin.org, and this has a page. This particular sessions, this group of sessions that we're doing monthly, has a separate page on that website, and all the recordings are there. So there you go. So let's get rocking and rolling. I try to keep these sessions to an hour and a half because they could go all day if we let them. So I keep them to an hour and a half, so it's a finite amount of time people can kind of plan. All right. We'll open it up, as I said, to anybody's questions in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about one of the concepts. It's a very, very important concept that came out of the 30th November talk that George Hammond gave in November 30th, 2014. And he didn't have a lot of time to talk about this. So I've been talking about this, and he's been talking about this more since 2014. And if you want to catch George's version of it versus the Kelvin Chin version of it, which covers the same basic principles, but everybody tells things differently, and I have different stories and so forth and so on, you can catch his on the Commonwealth Club website. So the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco, California. So if you just go to Commonwealth Club, type it into Google, you'll find it, and type George Hammond in there and type in Transcending Cruelty, something like that, in their search window on their website, and you'll find his version of this talk. Okay? I can't remember when he gave it, about 5 years ago or whatever. All right. My version of this talk is also on my YouTube channel that I just told you about. Okay? So you can go there and you can plug it in the search window, Transcending Cruelty. And I've given a few talks on this that are longer versions, more detailed versions of what Widge and I are going to kind of highlight at the beginning of this session in a minute. Okay? So, but as I said, the context came out of the 30th November talk that happened in 2014. And if you haven't seen it yet, you should go there to the 30thnovember.com website and watch that. It's a 3-hour long talk. Now, the funny and interesting story is that George had practiced the talk beforehand and anticipated that it would go a couple hours. Well, he must have talked a little bit more slowly. Maybe he wove in a couple of more stories. I don't know what, because when I was organizing that talk back in 2014, by the way. So I'm running around, I'm going like this. You can't see me on camera, obviously, thank goodness. But you see me walking around. I got up out of my chair. You'll see me in the audience, sometimes shots of the audience. I'm sitting there in a suit and a tie, and my son and my daughter are sitting on either side of me. I had gotten up out of my chair at that point, and I'm running around in the auditorium in Alexandria, Virginia, going like this. I didn't say anything, but he's talking, so I didn't want to interrupt his audio, but I'm running around literally going like this during the talk, off to the side, in front. I'm trying to get his vision because he'd already gone well over 2 hours at that point, right? And so after 2 hours, I'm like trying to wave him down, trying to get him like, like, look at your watch. I'm going like this. He doesn't see anything. He told us afterwards, we didn't test out the visual. We tested out the audio and everything else beforehand. We had 5 cameras, had a whole audio visual crew that we hired and so forth. They had their own manager, and they had 5 cameras. And they had the guys up on the soundboard and up in the back of the auditorium, the whole 9 yards. Anyway, we didn't test his visual. So I didn't know that he couldn't see anybody past the first row because the lights were so bright. So he couldn't see me. And so you'll see if you've watched the talk, or when you do, you'll see he looks at finally, looks at his watch, he goes, "Oh my, it's 2 hours and a half, or 2.5 hours, or 2 hours and 40 minutes or something." That's why the talk went 2 hours and 50 minutes, almost 3 hours. Okay. Because he had all this other stuff to cover. My point of telling you that is the Transcending Cruelty material, which he thought he was going to spend at least 10 or 15 minutes on, he probably spent 2 or 3 minutes on. 2 to 3 minutes, because he had this whole other list of other topics. And so he just slammed through them. So some of you may have heard that part of his talk and go, what was he talking about? That's a little confusing, or whatever. So we're going to try to shine some light on that, Widge and I. Okay. So who's Widge? Who's this guy, William Baldridge? He's got his name William Baldridge, but his nickname is Widge. So who's this guy who's going to help me with the PowerPoint slide, which I'll share screen with you in a second? Widge created this great PowerPoint on Transcending Cruelty, you'll see. But who's Widge? So William Baldridge is a guy I met. Supposedly, he tells me we met in 2014. But, I'm running around organizing this thing, and I've apologized to Widge for the last almost 10 years. Like, I don't remember you, but, but anyway, and then in 2020, he took my Afterlife series. By the way, I have a 6-part Afterlife series where I dive into different topics related to the afterlife in much greater detail than we can do in these monthly sessions. So they're 2 hours long each. There's 6 sessions. So it's 12 hours long. And I got another one starting on my birthday, January 7th. So that's next week, isn't it? Yeah. So Sunday, a week from tomorrow, starts another one. If you want to sign up for it, go to the kelvinchin.org website and go to the page that says 6-part Afterlife series page and just register there. So Widge took that that series of classes that I led in 2020, and that's how I remember we met anyway. And so he heard me talking about my past life memories. That's this book, right? Those of you who have read this book, my new book that just came out this year. After the Afterlife, you can't read my hands on it, but After the Afterlife, that's the title of the book. And these are all about my past life memories, how they surface and so forth. They go back 6,000 years, etc. And there's a page, there's a couple of pages in here where William Baldridge, the guy who's going to talk with us right now in a few minutes, talks about an experience that he had, and actually James Redman is visiting with him right now. So I'm going to let Widge tell you this story basically, but it's somewhere in this book here where there's a letter from William Baldridge. I can't find it right now, but those of you who have this book, you know what I'm talking about. So Widge, why don't you introduce yourself that way? Then I'll share screen in a second.
Okay, good. So my name is Widge Baldridge. I, at that time in 1973, was a student at Maharishi International University in Santa Barbara, California. The campus later tragically moved to Fairfield, Iowa, not nearly as nice as Santa Barbara. And Peter Griggs, who's on this call, was there as well, and we were very good friends. And James Redman, who's right here with me today, was there as well, and we were very good friends. James had another couple of friends that would go down to LA once a week, often like on a kind of a weekly basis, to listen to these lectures by a person who was really instrumental in bringing transcendental meditation to the West. He really hosted Maharishi and arranged a lot of Maharishi's meetings in the West Coast of the United States when he first started coming to the West. He was one of the very first meditators in the West, and ran an organization called the Spiritual Regeneration Movement. All of us came into TM through the Students International Meditation Society, which had kind of a different focus. But the Spiritual Regeneration Movement was much more about spiritual issues and matters. And Charlie Lutz was an incredibly reliable authority on a lot of these sort of esoteric spiritual issues. So James and his friends would go down to listen to Charlie Lutz every week, or if one or two of them would go. And on this particular week, I don't think James went, but we were both getting the readout after the meeting. And I had always been real attentive to issues regarding the life of Jesus. And they said that the lecture dealt with this idea that a number of people who had been around Jesus when Jesus was on earth are here again on earth now, and that one of them in particular was a TM teacher here now, and that he had been Saint Peter or Simon Peter in an earlier life, in a life that he shared with Jesus, and that subsequently this individual had come back and reincarnated again as Frederick the Great, and then is now alive and among us as a TM teacher. And again, this was 1973. And I remembered it because it didn't make any sense to me. I thought saints, when they died, didn't ever reincarnate. That was sort of a Hindu dogma. And I thought, Hindus seem to know a lot about reincarnation. This doesn't make any sense. Is he somehow biased against Christian saints and only Christian saints get reincarnated? I mean, I couldn't make any sense of it at all. So I remembered it well. And when I found out that Kelvin wasn't aware of this sort of this sort of awareness, that announcement that Charlie Lutz had made about him, Kelvin, I thought it was really surprising. Kelvin at the time points out he didn't even really believe in reincarnation back in 1973. So anyway, this was like 2020, and I checked with James to see, do you remember Charlie Lutz saying that? He said, I kind of vaguely do. I don't think I was there that week. Another guy drove down, somebody who had something to do with, he'd been a police officer before or something.
That was one of the guys that was down there all the time.
Yeah, right.
But I do remember, I mean, Charlie would say things like that. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
So anyway, I thought that was remarkable that that Charlie had pointed this out years before, and then years before Kelvin had become aware of it, and Charlie is since deceased and is no longer around. Actually, James was just complaining last night that Charlie always said, "Oh, all this will come out after I die, after I pass away. All this will be made public." James would say, "I haven't seen any of it since he passed away." But anyway, so that's a little bit of our background, and it relates to Kelvin. So
That thanks for sharing that, you guys, both of you. Yeah, so yeah, and I didn't know about that. Those of you who've read my book or heard my talks about or some of the podcasts, that I've been on talking about this, know that my memories started opening up in 1977. So 4 years after the events that Widge and James are talking about, 4 years after that is when I first started having past life memories, which I didn't even believe in at the time in 1977, never mind 1973. But when this guy, Charlie Lutz, by the way, who I've never met, I still haven't met him. Charlie Lutz, I never met him back then. I never heard any of his lectures because he was in the spiritual side of the TM organization, and I was in the science and education and sports side, and we stayed away from the spiritual people because the last thing a business person in a Fortune 500 company, we're going in talking to CEOs about learning meditation and teaching all of their employees. The last thing they want to hear about is reincarnation. Are you serious? They're like, they could like, get the heck out of the building. So we didn't talk about it, and we didn't expose ourselves even to the Charlie Lutz material because we were immersed in all the research that was being done. And those of you who know my history, you know that I was a test subject in the first medical studies in 1970 and 71 that Herb Benson did, Harvard Medical School professor and cardiologist and so forth. So on meditation. So yeah, and that was 4 years of what Widge just described was 4 years before I had any of my memories. And I even thought when I first started having after I had this memory of being with Jesus, and then I started having memories within, I think it was within a year-ish or so, something like that. I have the dates a little bit more accurately in my book, but whatever it was, within a year or so, I started having these memories of being a king of Prussia. And I didn't know which king of Prussia, but I thought that was weird and it didn't really make sense. And I really wasn't into remembering this stuff. I wasn't trying to recall past life memories. I was still doubting even the memories that I had, even though they were corroborated by George Hammond, who had told me back then that he had been my brother Andrew way back then. And he had told me we had filled in all these blanks in our respective stories. And I thought, well, that's weird. How does he know that? And how do I know that? So, but even notwithstanding all those experiences, I still doubted it. And then the knowing which king of Prussia didn't pop up into my awareness until I think 2015 or something like that. So fairly recently. But what these guys are talking about is this guy Charlie Lutz talking about this TM teacher, and I became a TM teacher in early 1973. So I was a TM teacher when he said this. And Charlie Lutz evidently knew who I was long before I knew who I was. So just interesting. So that's our connection here. Widge and I have become friends and so forth since. So so those of you who have read the book or haven't read the book yet, my new book, you got a little backstory. You've met Widge, virtually at least here. I'm going to share screen with you guys, and this is what we're going to open our discussion. Before we do our Q&A, as I said at the outset, we're going to do our open forum Q&A in a few minutes, but I wanted to talk about this transcending cruelty idea because it is so important, and you'll see why as we go through the slides here that Widge created. So Widge, do you want to just help us take us through, and I'll be like comments from the peanut gallery. Go ahead.
Sure. So the topics we're going to cover are about cruelty and how to transcend cruelty. The first topic is, why does bad stuff happen? what is bad behavior, what is cruelty. We're going to cover this concept of the importance of being important and how that relates to cruelty, and then how do we transcend cruelty, and then some other ideas related to transcending cruelty. So what do we mean by bad stuff happening to people? And Kelvin can elaborate on this, but as Kelvin is pointing out, there are different degrees of bad stuff. You might want to elaborate on that, Kelvin.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted us to start out with this slide is because you hear a lot in spiritual communities, and religions. I mean, when I say spiritual communities, I'm including, I use that kind of phrase. You'll hear me use that phrase sometimes. I don't just mean organized religion. Spiritual communities include, it's more of an umbrella that includes organized religion. It includes this group over here who meets and talks in some group about past lives. It's another group over here, another spiritual teacher over here. He's got a group, he or she's got a group, and they're talking about this and that. And it's not organized religion per se. So I put everybody under this big umbrella. I call it spiritual communities, spiritual groups. Okay. In this, underneath that umbrella of many, hundreds of millions, billions, what am I sorry? No, hundreds of millions. It's billions and billions of people who fall into this category of, spiritual group people, religious people. There's this notion of good and evil. There's this, you'll hear this a lot, right? And those of you who are Christians, you read in the Bible and so forth, this notion of good and evil. And it's an overstatement at best, and it's incorrect at worst. All right? There is no such thing as absolutely good and absolutely evil. There's no such thing as absolutes. There's all gradations. That's why I say in this slide that Widge and I put together, the degrees of bad. There's like bad, there's really bad, there's really, really bad, there's unbelievably bad, and then the other spectrum from unbelievably crazy bad is, it's sort of bad. There's these degrees of bad. There's not just this notion of evil. And I'm not sure if it's the next slide or not. No, it's not. So let's go back to this one, stay on this one, which is the notion that evil or bad is not some inanimate force that exists in the universe, like some of the spiritual groups tell you. That's false. There is no inanimate evil force. Evil or bad means there has to be some subjectivity to it. That's why you have the degrees. There's a subjective interpretation and there's a subjective delivery of bad actions. We'll call it bad behavior, okay? And we'll define what we mean by bad in a second. But just the notion that it somehow exists in the universe and sometimes it happens to you and sometimes it doesn't is a false notion. And it's a notion that I think, who knows why, but this is my opinion, why it has come about is because these superstitions that people concoct are superstitions that are concocted by other people who want to control the people through those superstitions. And if you go through me, because I'm the high priest, I'm not the high priest, but if the high priest was talking, they'd say, you got to go through me, and then I'm going to help you avoid all that bad evil that's out there trying to get at you. No, it's just one of the many, many, many means of human control of other humans, this notion. And so bad is an animate. Animate meaning what? You got to be alive. You got to be a free-thinking mind to do bad stuff or good stuff. All right? And there's no such thing as pure good either. There's really good, there's really, really, really good, there's unbelievably good, and there's kind of sort of good stuff. There's degrees to all of this. That's the point. All right? Go ahead, Witch.
Yeah, those are great points, Kelvin. So the next topic is, what is cruelty? Where does it come from? So in the 30th November address, one of the quotes is that cruelty is the desire to gain happiness from another person's pain. And that's the angle on cruelty that, as I understand it, Kelvin and George and others are interested in addressing.
Yeah,
How
and
to,
the reason is because we can substitute the word cruelty for bad.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about bad. But I inserted this slide here about bad first because bad is the word that most people think of. And I want to debunk this whole evil notion. But people understand what good and bad is. Cruelty is a little bit more esoteric for a lot of people. It might be a little bit more abstract. But if you've ever been abused by somebody, you know what cruelty is. And that's the definition, right? And I think most people would agree that that is the definition. Somebody's getting off, somebody's getting their jolly, somebody's getting happy. They enjoy making somebody else suffer in some way, whether physically, emotionally, or otherwise. Go ahead, Widge.
and the mechanics of that are that if people feel miserable, it makes them better when they make the people around them feel more miserable than they feel. That's sort of our understanding of where being bad or being cruel comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it's just logical. You think about it. If somebody's feeling really bad, lack of confidence, low self-esteem, they don't feel good about themselves. That's what we're calling miserable. They're unhappy. Simple English. They're unhappy. That's an unhappy person. How do they make themselves happier? By depressing other people around them, by bullying other people around them, because that it raises them up. It buoys them, if you know that language, B-U-O-Y-S. It raises them up. It buoys them. It raises them up. It makes them feel better. Oh, I feel better. I made other people feel worse around me, right?
So the key point is the next slide. It comes from this book that that Marcus Aurelius updated. The point is, what drives people to be cruel? What motivates cruelty? And this is from Kelvin's book. This is his quote. It's ironically, the motivator is the same motivator that motivates any of us to do anything. It's the pursuit of happiness. So it's a little surprising that it's the same motivator as doing good, just different circumstances, because the
reason
person
is
feeling really bad has a good reaction.
The reason the bully does this is because it works, but they don't realize that they're creating a miserable universe around themselves. And so the long-term effects of it are that they're going to create a universe of misery, and they'll live their lives in that. But because it works, the bullying works, it does make them short-term feel good. It makes them feel great sometimes to bully other people.
I just want to throw this last point in. I mean, the point is kind of that understanding this is a good thing, and it may help you kind of, see it help you see the other person's perspective in a different light. So it's sort of helpful to have this to understand that the person being cruel is really just pursuing his own happiness, like the rest of us are pursuing our happiness.
Well, I want to embellish on that point, which is I've been cruel, and so have you, Widge. We've all been cruel at times in the way that we're defining this. So it's not an us and a them thing. It's not that we're good and they're bad. No, everybody has engaged in cruel behavior if you're candid with yourself. Have you ever been in the car? This guy has, me. Have you ever been in the car with your kids when they're little and your blood sugar is low and you're going down the freeway and you're trying to make it to the hotel or the motel in time before it closes, and everybody's hungry, and you're saying, and there's no more food in the car, and everybody's blood sugar is a little low, and you're trying to get to where you're going, and then you're going to eat when you get there. And if you ever told your kids to shut up, has anybody ever done that? Any of you parents, have you told the kids to shut up? Yeah, that's cruel behavior. All right. That's cruel behavior. You may have not have thought about it as cruel behavior. That's why I have the slide at the beginning about what's bad. There are degrees of bad. That's not good. That's not good parenting. All right. Let's call a spade a spade. And on my part, your part, we've all done this, is the point. And so let's get off of, and nobody should be in any high horse that, oh, but these bad people and these bullies. Okay, fine. There are bullies out there that maybe I'm not bullying to that degree, but I bullied my kids in that moment. All right. So, and why did I do that? Short-term pursuit of happiness. It made me feel good. I vented. I got them to shut up for a second so I can make it the other 30 miles to the restaurant, right? Another 30 minutes on the freeway to get there, going 60 miles an hour. And then we can check in and we can eat at the restaurant that's at the motel. All right. But give me a break. We got to get there. I got to pay attention to the traffic. Right. So it gives me a little glimmer of happiness, right, to tell my kids to shut up right there. And if you're candid about that, you'll be honest with yourself. You'll see that, yeah, it did make me feel good just for a minute there. Okay, great. I got them to shut up. Right. But it is cruel behavior in the way that we're defining it. And what we're trying to do, what George and others and I were trying to do, is teach people the nuances. Where are the gray areas in all this spiritual stuff? There's so many people out there teaching you, thou shalt do this and don't do this. And oh, if you do this, you're really a great person. Oh, don't do that. It's all this black and white stuff, right? It's very, very rules-oriented stuff out there. For those of you who've been involved in any of these spiritual communities. But where's the nuances? The gray areas is where we live life. We don't live life in the black and whites, you know? Right? So this is what we're trying to teach. This is what all of what I do is trying to teach people in layperson language how to understand how to navigate the gray areas. Go ahead, Witch.
Yeah, well, the next slide we'll just sort of touch on briefly and then go to the one after that. But this slide is about the sort of typical bully who's kind of always bullying people. The topic is the importance of being important. The point is that people's need to feel important is like any other desire. It's designed to produce happiness. But in this case, they desire another person's pain and suffering. So we've kind of already covered that, but it's this notion that they need to feel important to feel good about themselves.
Yeah, I think the importance of being important is an important concept. It's a phrase that George came up with, this importance of being important here in the purple part, because it's, again, I want to underscore, if you think about your own life, you've had this moment in your life millions of times, if you're really candid with yourself. You've made yourself feel more important because you knew something more about your sports team or some athlete, if you're into sports, than on some other fantasy football team, and that puffed you up. It made you feel more important. This is not necessarily, you're not necessarily a cruel person, but this importance of being important, the way it fits into this cruelty notion in the context is that it is an element of this notion of cruelty, is the importance of being important. But the importance of being important is something that is it's ubiquitous. Everybody has this notion of, you get a good grade at school, you want to show off and tell people you have a great jump shot, you want to show people you got some great stats in business, you got you made this incredible meal. A friend of mine, she was just showing me, it was an incredible meal that she made. She made this incredible vegetarian meal for herself yesterday, and she said, that's not a cruel thing, all right? That's a pride thing, and it's nothing wrong with that. But there's an element of the importance of being important there that can kind of creep in if it pride, being proud of something is not what we're talking about when we say importance of being important. Importance of being important is taking it too far. Okay. So it's when you get too far into it, now you're getting into the importance of being important. Just think of the language of the words here, the importance of being important. What does it mean? It's important for you to, for others to think that you're important. That's what that phrase means. Okay. So in the same way that being proud of yourself and self-confident and so forth is not the same as being arrogant. You see the degree here, right? It's not the same as being arrogant. Being confident and proud of oneself is a sign of inner strength. Being arrogant is a sign of weakness, right? You got to lord it over. You got to prove yourself to other people. In the same way, the importance of being important is analogous to arrogance, whereas just being proud of yourself is just a normal, neutral kind of self-confident kind of state. So what we're saying here in the context of cruelty is that when you take this too far, that's when the importance of being important creeps in. It's a phrase that George came up with, and I like it because it captures this notion that if you take it too far, then you could be sliding down that slippery slope to creating suffering and being cruel and creating suffering in other people. All right. So this is a lesson for all of us, and how do we learn how to not be cruel, in addition to how do we avoid cruel people? It's both. How do we avoid being a bully? Okay. So this next slide, go ahead, Witch.
Yeah, the next slide actually is almost just directly from Kelvin's purple book here. I mean, it's page 87, 88. It's how do we transcend cruelty? What do we do if we encounter someone who's being cruel or trying to bully us or harm us in order to make themselves happy? So Kelvin lays out 5 really good steps here for thwarting efforts to inflict pain on us. So they're really well thought through. Kelvin, you'll
Sure.
understand them better than I do. You should
Sure. So the first thing that it's kind of a review and a little addition of several other ideas here. So to review, the first 2 things are a review of what we've just talked about today already, which is recognizing what's motivating the cruel person is their own inner state of low self-esteem, lack of confidence. Their own inner weakness is why the bully bullies. Okay? That's why the bully bullies. And they bully, and why? Because they want to make you feel worse than they do, which makes them feel better. Okay, that's steps 1 and 2 here. So recognition and understanding of those things is important, because if you don't, then you cower from the bully. You think, oh, don't bully me, right? No. So understand and recognize that first. That gives you a sense of control. Those of you who have read my purple book, that Widge is referring to, my Marcus Aurelius updated book, know that throughout the book, I mention this notion, this principle that I've been teaching for at least 2,000 years that I'm aware of, which is control what you can control, let go of what you can't. Control what you can control, and let go of what you cannot control. Well, steps 1 and 2, you have control over. So that's important. Recognition and understanding first. The third step is sovereignty. What does that mean? That's a phrase that I've used recently within the last 10, 15 years in my talks about how I think about our mind, our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, that we are sovereign, meaning what? Usually the word sovereign is used in politics. It's usually used in relation to countries, a sovereign country, a sovereign nation. What does that mean? That means the nation has their own rules, their own culture, they have borders, they get their own military, they get their own, government. All of that is unique to that particular nation. Well, in the same way, I use the word sovereign as it relates to our souls, our minds, our consciousness. Those are all synonyms as far as I'm concerned. And they're unique. They have boundaries. They are distinct and separate from all the other minds. We may be connected in an emotional way or connected energetically, but we are not the same as each other. We are all unique. That's what sovereign means. That dovetails with the concept of free will. So each mind has its own free will to do whatever it wants to do. Nobody can make you do anything you don't want to do. People can try to make you do stuff you don't want to do, but you can choose not to do it, at least, at the very least, even if you were locked up and incarcerated incorrectly, wrongly in prison, you have control over this, your consciousness, your mind. So you may not have control over your body, your biological body, right? Whether it's being incarcerated in prison wrongly or rightly, either way, right? Or whether it's biologically having some terrible illness. We always still have control and sovereignty over our consciousness, our mind, all right? So that's that notion, which is very important. And then, so recognizing, understanding those first three things, and then confusion. So here's where action kicks in. If you're being bullied, this is for the victim, the person being bullied, is to do the unexpected. Do not cower. Do you know what cower means? It means you go in the corner and go, oh, don't yell at me. Oh, I'll do whatever you want. That's the master. That's the master that the bully wants you to view them as. The bully wants you to view them as your dictator, as your master, as your boss, as somebody who has control over you. That's their cudgel, that's their hammer. Don't give them the hammer to hit you with. So instead, do the opposite, create confusion. If you demonstrate that you're happy, regardless of how they're treating you, that messes them up. Because remember, what's the step number 2 is understanding that they want to make you unhappy in order to make themselves happy. So if you don't go along with that, that messes them up. That's the point number 4, confusion. Okay? Do the unexpected. Example I use in my book, those of you who've probably, most people at least have seen, or maybe probably all of you at least know who James Bond is. You know, James Bond, the fictional character in Ian Fleming's books and movies and blah, blah, blah. And Daniel Craig, first it was Sean Connery, and then a bunch of others in between who weren't so good, the actors who played him. And then Daniel Craig. I think those two guys were the best James Bonds. That's my opinion. You may disagree with me, but whatever. Yeah. But, you know, what did he do? What's the character do? Not the actor, but what's the character in the story always do? They're always fighting the bad guys, and they're always captured by the bad guys. That's part of the formula of a James Bond movie. But what does he always do? He does step number 4. When he is being abused and beaten, typically beaten physically in some way, he creates confusion. And somehow he gets out of it. You know he's going to get out of it, you know, right? Somehow he gets out of it, except for the last Daniel Craig movie. But anyway, that's how they got Daniel Craig out of the series. They killed him off. But on all the other ones, right? Confusion and then separation. You leave the presence of the bully, whether it's temporarily, you go upstairs to your own room or whatever, or your own office. If it's a business bully, I've been bullied at business. Kelvin Chin has 20 years ago. I won't name names, but if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll probably figure out where it was happening. But, you know, it probably gave you too many clues there. Anyway, so it's like, separate, leave. I left that organization, or leave the marriage, leave the relationship if you're being bullied. Don't stay in it. You know, escape the situation after you've created that confusion. Okay? So there you go.
This one This is a great point. Just other ideas related to transcending cruelty. It's about one way at kind of a macro level to reduce the cruelty here on earth. And step one is to recognize that we all have free will. And then building on that, and Kelvin can elaborate, but a decision that we understand that the movement, the larger movement has come to is no more commandments, because commandments just lead to misery. And more misery leads to more cruelty. So a different approach from the world's religions.
Yeah. So here's the commentary on this slide. We've talked about free will already, but along with free will, which just simply means personal choice, we always have personal choice, right? At least, as I said, personal choice as it relates to how we think about whatever is going on. No commandments from the movement. The movement, those of you who've seen the 30th November talk know the movement includes these personalities: Jehovah, Jesus, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was also John the Baptist in a previous lifetime, and the prophet, is it Elijah? Yeah. And Shankara, who was also Vyasa in a previous lifetime, who wrote the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. And Shankara in a previous lifetime was also the Greek philosopher, the ancient Greek philosopher from around 500 BC, Archytas. So he crossed over between the West and what we call the West and East, Western and Eastern philosophies. Shankara did. And Swami Bhavananda Saraswati, who Maharishi refers to in 30th November, talk as Gurudev, and George refers to him as the way Maharishi referred to him as Gurudev. It just means exalted or great teacher. So those, and there was about another dozen or 12 or 15 others who are part of this movement. No commandments from them on the other side. There's no commandments, no thou shalts. That's what I mean by commandments in this slide. No thou shalt do this, no rules that you do this, you got to do this. From a spiritual standpoint, again, we're separating social rules and, don't drive through the red light rules. We're not talking about that. Those rules are important. No rape and murdering, all right? No stealing other people's property. Those are individual rules that are coming from this side that we in certain governmental municipal organizations decide socially are good for us, okay? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about rules, spiritual rules coming from the other side, okay? So, but so there's no commandments in terms of how you should live your life spiritually from those members of the movement I just listed. And the reason is because it leads to more misery. How does it lead to more misery? It leads to more misery because you are, by definition, by doing a thou shalt on somebody from a spiritual standpoint, you are by definition telling them to do this and not do that, or do not do this and do that, either way, right? You're taking away their free will choice to do something that they may want to do. You are messing around with their desires, their wishes, all right? And what the thinking is that it is better for people to learn through their mistakes because that is the only way anybody learns. People wonder how I have figured stuff out over the last millions of years. I don't know how long I've been on planet Earth in a human form, but humans have been around on planet Earth for millions of years, they say. So let's just say I've been a human for millions of years. My memories go back 6,000 of those years that I've read about in my book, but it doesn't mean that I've only been a human for 6,000 years. I could have been a human, I don't know, a lot longer than that, and I don't remember the stuff back then before 6,000 years. So the point is, how do we learn through all this huge millennia? We learn through trial and error and learning and skinning our knees. That's how we learn. And so at least that's how I've learned. And I think that's how most of you have learned too, if you're really candid with yourself. You've been through some tough times. All of us have. It doesn't matter if you're 15 years old, if you're 55 years old, everybody has been through tough times at different points in their life. And you you navigate through it. And we, by definition, those of you who are watching this or are live here with us today, you know, those of you who are watching the recording tend to be a little more self-aware. You're more self-conscious about stuff. You're thinking about stuff by definition, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Okay? There's lots of people on planet Earth who don't think about stuff, and I'm not saying that, I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that that's factual. Okay? They don't, and they're not interested in what we're talking about today. And I'm not saying, I'm not judging them for that either. But as we go through our eternal lives, the more we learn from our mistakes, the more likely we are going to not make those mistakes again in the future. Because we do make mistakes. You hear some people say, "Oh, there's no such thing as mistakes." Well, okay, I understand what people mean by that. They mean that what they really mean is that you can learn from your mistakes and you can take mistakes as opportunities for learning. I get that, and that's how I live my life. But I've made mistakes. I've hurt some people in my life. All right? And I've hurt some people for the reasons that we've discussed today, because the short term, it made me happy at the time. And it's not a good thing. And I'm not proud of it. And those were mistakes. Call a spade a spade. So people, those say, well, they're not mistakes. Those are just opportunities to learn. Now, I'm owning up to it. If you don't own up to when you hurt somebody and you made a mistake and you hurt them, then you will continue to hurt people over and over and over again for millennia. And that's a problem with humanity because we see that happening today on planet Earth. All right? So that's why this lack of free will, we could say, this commandment mentality that has existed in spiritual groups. Those of you, some of you have been in them, you know, before, is not a good thing. It leads to more misery. And more misery leads to cruelty. That last sentence on that slide. More misery leads to cruelty, and I am an anti-anxiety, anti-cruelty, anti-suffering person. That's my thing. So when George and the group started talking about this on 30th November, it resonated with me. So this is one of the things that you guys have heard me talk about. Okay? I think that's it, Widge. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. So James and I have to bow out. My wife and daughter have other plans for us this afternoon, evening. Thank you all very much for letting us participate. Really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next month. Well, February 28th, or no, January 30th. Yeah, that'll work.
January 30th. Yeah. So thanks for coming, Widge, and thanks for putting the slides together, and thanks for joining us, James. Great to see you. Thanks. Thanks. Bye. So now we'll open it up for the floor to any other questions and people have got. Jolene, I saw that you had your hand up very early on, and I'm not sure if you had a specific question you wanted to ask, but now would be the time. Or you can ask anything about the slides that Widge put together and we just went through together as well. Anything. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just unmute yourself and speak up. Let's see. Some questions. Let's see. The people who wrote questions and comments in here, can you read them? Because it's too time consuming for me to scroll through the chat. Can you just ask your questions out loud, please? Gyro?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you, yeah. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me lower the volume of the TV. So, when you were talking about that, when that you and I and everyone have had moments of maybe somewhat regretful cruelty that we needed to do to get a break. We need to do a little I guess later on we say, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or so. And so that reminded me of the lyrics on of a song that was made famous long ago by Frank Sinatra, That's Life, where he says or sings, I've been a puppet, a pauper, a pirate, a poet, a pawn and a king. I've been up and down and over and out. And I know one thing, each time I find myself flat on my face, I pick myself up and back on the race. Because why did it remind me of that? Because that in that case I'm applying it to things that we've done not just in this life but in past lives, but we've forgotten because we can't remember our past lives. So we've been all these things, and good and bad, up and down, but also we've done bad things, good things also, but we've done bad things that we don't remember. So in a way, we're carrying sins or seeds of sins or negative karma in that sense.
Yeah,
It might.
it's a great point, Gyro. And here's the thing. So, and we can release them. That's the thing. And so that's the takeaway from what we're talking about today is if we recognize that we ourselves have been a bully at times and been hurtful at times, we can learn from that and change and catch ourselves from going down that road of cruelty sooner and kind of head it off. So you're right. And it could be from past lives. You're right. And not everybody remembers their past lives. And I don't remember everything from my past lives. I remember a bunch of stuff, but nobody remembers everything. Look, nobody remembers everything from their own lifetime, this lifetime. Forget about past lives. But so you're absolutely right. These patterns, I call them emotional patterns, can sneak over because they're part of us still until we release them. And what do I mean by release? That's what I mean by learning and recognizing, learning from the past, which we may not realize how far past it is. Like you say, we don't realize necessarily remember it's from a past life, but it could be. But where it's from, it doesn't matter. The point is that it's surfacing right now in our present life, which is all that matters, and then that creates our future. So how can we change our future? It's by changing our present, what I call the continual present, right? Because it's always continually changing. The present is always changing to the new present. Now it's not the present, so forth. But it's a really good point. And to Frank Sinatra's song, I would add to his lyrics the concept that, yeah, get up and start over again, but hopefully start over again a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser. Don't just start over again and make the same mistake again, because then you're on that, the proverbial, what they call it, it's like the wheel, the mouse in the treadmill. You're just doing the same thing. We want to progress, and progress in progress and improvement in life has to come through learning and adjusting and change in a positive direction. But it's a great point, Gyro. Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, Susan, I see your hand up. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, I have two questions, one that I had and another that was sparked by what you just said.
Sure.
My first question is, let me say both and then you could respond to both. What are we progressing toward? That's based on what you just said. And the other question is, do you have any additional comments about really serious cruelty, such as genocide and really like seriously cruel people like Hitler, for example, the
Yeah.
quintessential representative of cruelty? What are
Yeah.
your comments about those kinds of things?
Yeah. So what are we progressing towards? And I will answer both these questions, and you can come back, Susan, with a sub question or whatever if I don't completely answer it, or if I raise another question or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
So what are we progressing towards? First of all, there's no goal, there's no place, there's no state of mind that everybody has that they're all progressing towards. So the way I look at progress is improvement of myself, my knowledge of myself. So to me, progress is measured internally, not externally, first of all, and even internally within myself. It's a changing, fluid thing. As long as I feel like I am growing in my own self-knowledge, that's to me progress. That's how I think of it. So not of a place or a state of being or a state of mind, other than you could say generally feeling more inwardly contented and inwardly peaceful. You could say that. I could say that about myself, but it's kind of general, right? There's not a specific to that other than that. More inner contentment and inner peace. And how do I get more inner contentment and inner peace? For me anyway, and each of you have to answer this question you're in your own way for yourselves, because we're all unique. But for me, that is finding more alignment with my desires, in other words, my desires, my hopes, wishes, and dreams. I just call them my desires, and my thoughts, actions, and behavior. So if there's more alignment there, that's what most people think of as fulfillment of my desires. Then I'm going to be happier and more inwardly peaceful and so forth and so on, right?
Yeah, you'd have to, I think, somehow define, when you talk about desires, we'd have to be clear that somehow they're not related to being cruel. Like, there must be some kind of a rule, like, that would clarify, like, it can't be that your fulfillment comes from hurting other people, for example.
That's for me, right? So for me, Kelvin Chin, if I'm talking again about myself, you're right. I would say in a way that's not hurtful to other people. So I would add that. And sometimes those of you who heard me in other lectures say that's part of that. Yeah, without hurting other people. Now, for somebody else, we've already talked about it today. That's their MO. That's what works for them. That's what the bully, but they have the same pursuit of happiness. When I using happiness, that's a phrase everybody uses, pursuit of happiness, but I prefer a phrase, a pursuit of contentment and inner peace, but that's not the phrase everybody uses. Okay. It's too many words, because it's not really happiness. When I went to my uncle's funeral 2 years ago, which is true story. Okay. But I was inwardly content and at peace at his funeral, right? Regardless of being sad. So it's not just, if you say pursuit of happiness, you only think of it that way. Then, well, what about when you're sad? No. I was sad, but I was still in a state of inner contentment and inner.
Yeah.
Right?
But so could you consider it progress for someone to get better at being content by torturing people? Is that still progress?
Well,
If that's their desire?
In a weird way, it is progress for them, but it's short-sighted. This is why we're doing this transcending cruelty discussion, is to try to educate people, not you, Susan, because I know you, and I know you don't have this whatever you call thread inside you, but there are lots of people who do. And this kind of goes to your second question, where there's lots of people who do have that thread, and that it works, that when the more they torture and bully people, the happier they feel. But what the education is, and this is and as I talk about in my second book, the purple one, this Marcus Aurelius one, Ridge was referring to as the purple book, this one, the essays, there are several essays in here about cruelty. And as I talk about in this book, because you guys know me, those of you who've taken any of my classes before, I'm a practical realist. I'm a realist. And so those cruel people, the bullies, they find that it really works. So the realist in me tells me that no matter how much education that we do about cruelty and about the source of it, and about the limitations of the happiness that can come about from being a bully, they're going to still bully until and unless and until they themselves, within themselves, not because I'm telling them or you're telling them or some government is telling them not to, they're going to continue doing it until they have their own inner aha experience to see that, these people are miserable around me, and now they're all bullying each other, and now I've surrounded myself with a whole bunch of bullies, and they're not even listening to me anymore. Until it gets to the really, really that bad, the bully probably not going to be paying close attention to anything Kelvin Chin says.
So do you think it's inevitable that bullies will realize that bullying is not beneficial?
I don't think anything is inevitable, first of all. Nothing is inevitable. Everything is open to free will and choice of that person to wake up or not wake up and be self-aware or not self-aware. That's what I mean, wake up and see stuff for what it is. Because how many people do you know who are unrealistic and don't see things for what they are? I'm not talking about bullies now, just people in general.
Yeah, a lot.
They're unwilling to accept reality, right? Lots of people, fortunately, right? And so I don't think it's inevitable that they will see it. I am hopeful. Those of you who know me, I am a positive realist. I have a hopefulness to me. What's called, they actually have a term for this. I've actually taken these different psychology tests, and they say I'm an idealistic realist. I have ideals, an idealism view, a hopeful view of the world and humanity. But I have a realist, a pragmatic view that goes along with it. They're not mutually exclusive. Okay? So some people will hear me and they say, oh, he's so pessimistic. No, that's the realist side of me. I am idealistic about hopefulness and trying to help educate people. But I am a realist, and I know that most people take them a very, very, very long time to change. Right? So I continue to do what I do, not for the masses of the 8 billion, but for a small subset of the people who are open and willing, have ears to hear, right? Because those people will influence other people. I am a seed sower. I am a sower of seeds. And if I could plant enough seeds, eventually, over the next, I take a 500,000 to 1 million year view of humanity. That's my view. I take the long view. I'm not the usual person that you know from having lunch with me, Susan. I take the 50,000 to 100,000 year view, whatever. I take the long view, whatever. Fill in a number, it doesn't matter. 500 to 1,000.
The
Right?
numbers guy.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, sometime I can pursue this line of questioning for a while, but I'll let you move on to other people.
Yep, we can always revisit. Yeah. Connie?
Yeah, my question is, when people go to the afterlife, like my grandfather, like he passed away like 45 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they come back. Can you still connect with their spirit, or do you connect with them here on Earth, or like on the other side, or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, short answer is definitely yes on both. You can absolutely, definitely, yes, connect with them on the other side and again on this side. And
But how do I know where he is? Like he passed away like 45 years ago. He could be there, or he could be a person here.
Right.
Life.
How do you know? How do you know where he is and who he is and who? That's a matter of the souls connecting with each other, the mind or the consciousness connecting with each other and recognizing each other. That's how you know.
Oh,
So,
okay, like here on Earth, if I meet a person, I go, God, he reminds me of my grandfather, like that, right?
It's too bad that Widge had to leave, because Widge actually has one of his closest friends, he's convinced, was his grandfather.
Oh, wow.
Before his grandfather died. It's exactly what you're talking about. And so maybe another time, if you see Widge on this session next month, ask him that question and he'll tell you the details. I don't know all the details. I know some of them, but he will give you the blow by blow, as they say, details of how he recognized his grandfather who died, obviously when Widge was young. He recognized his grandfather. He's come back, and he's is one of his close friends. So yeah,
And-
and you know the story about my kids, Connie,
Oh,
my
okay.
right? So my kids,
Yeah.
and we recognized each other, right? My daughter was my daughter this lifetime, who's 29 years old. Sam, my daughter's named Sam. She's 29 now. She was my daughter 2,000 years ago. She was my sister 250 years ago. We were very, very close. I went into a deep depression at 250 years ago, they say, for a month or so after she died. I built this whole temple in the back, on the grounds for her, in expressing my love for my sister who had died tragically, much younger, 30 years younger than I was almost. Right? So,
Okay.
yeah.
And even pets, like I have a kitten named Anandalite, and my other cat Savannah passed away like 5 years ago, and she's exactly like the same as hers. Like I think she's been reincarnated. And
Yes.
whenever by accident if I call her Savannah, she responds. Like she just responds in this way to me that I think it's my past cat.
Yes, yes. Animals absolutely can come back in and visit us again. I'm looking for a picture right now on my iPhone. Hold on a second. I want to show you something that's directly, I think I have it, related to what you're talking about. A picture of this. Yep, here she is. Nyla. So this is Nyla sleeping outside my bedroom door. You see that picture?
Oh.
Right?
Uh-huh.
She's a huge dog. She's one of these, oh, I'm pulling a blank. Somebody remind me. Somebody look this up. Tell me. It's one of the dogs, Mastiff. Thank you. Mastiff. That's what it is. It just popped into my head. She's a Mastiff. Mastiffs are huge dogs. I don't know if you can tell by looking at that picture,
Yeah,
but she is about 130, 140 pounds. That's female. The male Mastiffs were 175 to 200 pounds each. So, and the ancient Romans used them in war as battlefield killing animals. They trained them to kill on the battlefield. You imagine a 200-pound, a 210-pound dog coming at you,
wow.
on the battlefield in ancient Rome. Okay, when I met, she's not my dog. She's my friend's dog. But when I lived temporarily with them for a while in their house, she would sleep outside my bedroom door every single night with, her butt or her face or her body right up next to the crack in my door. She would lean against
Yeah.
and I knew she and I had been together 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome, but she was one of my palace. She was one of my guard dogs. She wasn't a battlefield dog. And then and my other dog, I had a golden retriever, same. In this lifetime, he was my dog in the 1980s. So yeah, absolutely. I had a cat. I'm sure Eloise and I have been together before as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. No. It's a
Okay.
really good point. Yeah. Animals, absolutely. Definitely. And you can be with them again in the future too, after they die. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Really good point. Thanks, Connie.
All
Yeah.
right, you're welcome.
Really good points. Ted.
I believe I was a disciple of Christ, that's why I do all this walking and
Yeah.
I did a lot of stuff for him, but I put it in the chat that I noticed in this life that I'm now that I'm in my 60s, I'm suffering less than when I was like a kid and until like 10 years ago. It's like the way the kids have bullied me and stuff. It's
Yes.
like I got 13 more months till I retire, but I decided to look at it as grace and gratitude. Like every day I thank the spirit for 3 things, and then when I go to bed, I thank the spirits for 3 things that happened that day because I just feel like if I go in gratitude, it would just be so much better. like God provided like me with a good job, and I was able to take care of myself after the divorce and buy a home and be productive.
Well,
And I am a platelet blood donor for cancer people. So I just made my 37th donation last week. And the president of Vitalent contacted me, and then the cancer patient called me the other day whose blood she received my blood, and she thanked me for donating blood to the cancer people on her behalf. So, you know.
That's beautiful. The other
Yeah.
suggestion I have with you, because you cannot physically separate from those kids in your school system, because those people don't know the history. Connie was bullied by the students in her classroom because of her speech issues and so forth. And Connie is trying to finish out her number of years at the school system to get her full pension. So there's a huge financial incentive for Connie to stick it out, is the point. So my other suggestion, Connie, to you, because you cannot physically separate yourself by definition, but you can emotionally separate yourself. And by doing that, it creates a boundary that those kids will start to feel and then respect, even if you never say a word to them. That's the thing. So you can do this internally, and you can do it. You can kind of set yourself up. If you have this practice of doing this right before bed, you can remind yourself the next morning that you're emotionally separate from the kids in that respect, right? You could remind yourself before you go to sleep. Add that to your list. And that will naturally, without forcing, without manipulating your mind while you're in school, it'll automatically create a sense of boundary, because it's coming from within you, that they may start to feel and then respond to and act more respectfully as a result. Okay? Suggestion.
Right. And that's with other situations too.
Absolutely.
So, right.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Applies to every other situation, but I was just tailoring it for you because I know your situation, your life situation.
Okay, thanks.
Well, yeah.
And now I'm in another one. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Okay.
Yep. Good luck with that. Ted.
Trying to come through. How you doing?
Hey, Ted. Good to see you.
Good to see you. What was I going to say? Of course, I know that I knew you in our past life, and I don't know if you remember as far as I remember now, a little more different things about you, and I was very intimidated by you. I remember that, and that was because of your personality, your character. Though we weren't really close, we were acquainted. But I know I remember being intimidated and just watching your flamboyant sort of, I wouldn't say attitude, but that boldness. But in any case, the question the young, who was before her ex, she had two questions. I didn't think you got to the second part of a cruelty when she talked about Hitler and things like men or different people who are very on the extreme end of cruelty. So you think, can you go ahead and talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So people use Hitler as an example, but it could be Hitler, it could be Mussolini, it could be Genghis Khan, it could be
Right.
It could be Mao in China, Mao Zedong, it could be a lot of different people through history is the point, right? But Hitler's the one that most people talk about because he's more recent, it's only 80 years ago or whatever it is. But the thing is, first of all, we need to, I think, remember that as horrific as the behavior is of all of those people I just listed, they had horrific behavioral actions, just stuff that they did was horrific. They also had moments of kindness and to other people. Obviously, in Hitler's case, not the Jews, but there were moments where they're not. I'm just bringing back to this point that I talked about at the beginning of today. There's no such thing as an evil person who is 100% absolutely evil 100% of the time with everybody. That's just not reality, okay? But Hitler is often used and talked about in that sense because so the actions, some of the behavioral actions that he took and ordered people to do were absolutely horrific, okay? So the fact that the action was off the charts horrific doesn't mean that the individual, him or herself, is 100% all the time, never a good moment, never a good thought, a kind thought in his or her life, okay? So I want to just say that to just dispense with that notion and to reinforce it because Hitler is the classic example people always use, right? A mind is a mind and they're making choices. And did he make horrific, cruel choices? Absolutely, yes. And does he have to account for that? Yes. But there's no panel of judges on the other side who's judging him. But there are, I don't know how many tens of millions of people who died, it's just some crazy number because of him, right? In the camps and this and that, and not just even in the camps, but outside the camps, so and so on, who are never going to forget who he is, and he is going to have to account, if they want to have him account, for all those bad actions. So we never, whether you're a Hitler or whether it's you or me, nobody ever forgets the bad stuff that we did to them, okay? Nobody ever forgets. This whole forgiving and forgetting thing is a myth. Just forget about that. But here's the thing, in the context of the cruelty discussion today, here's the thing that's important for people to remember, which I think a lot of people forget, which is how do you rehabilitate, let's say, somebody who is cruel? What would you think, Ted? Any thoughts on that?
Rehabilitate someone who is cruel. I would have them experience, what they're dishing out. Experience. I would have them eat some of the same food that they've been dishing out, as one way, and not necessarily doing it of a cruel thing, but like seeing it. What is it? Some might call it karma. But that's one thing. There was another comment I wanted to make.
Hold on, before we leave that.
But that would be one way.
But no, my next question to you, Ted, is that's classic punishment of a person.
Right.
Does punishment change behavior? What's the goal, first of all? Let's just agree upon the goal. If you have a cruel person and you're trying to rehabilitate them, what are you trying to get them to be? More cruel or less cruel?
Less, of course. Less cruel.
Less cruel. Okay. So does punishment change behavior? What do we know from all the psychology and sociology studies? Hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands.
Statistically, no.
It doesn't change. So
no.
If punishment does not change behavior, and we've already said why the cruel person is cruel is because they're so miserable inside. Why would making the person more miserable make them less cruel? It wouldn't. It would make them more cruel because the more miserable you are. Look, I'm not Hitler miserable, okay? When I'm driving down the street in my low blood sugar and I snap at the kids, like the example I gave you guys earlier
right.
I'm not that level of miserable, but I'm unhappy because I'm really starving, hungry, and I got to get to the motel, and check in before they give our room away. Let's say they have some rule. I'm making this up, but let's say they have a rule. I got to get there by 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock p.m. Otherwise, they're going to give my room away to people who are sitting in the lobby because, it's Super Bowl weekend or something. I don't know. I never.
Right.
But let's just say There's something big conference going on, and they're going to give their room away at 9 o'clock. And now it's 8:35, and I got 30 more miles to go in 25 minutes. And my kids are complaining. All right. That's not Hitler miserable, we'll call it, but I'm miserable at that time. So my point is, does making the person more miserable make them more kind? No. Dishing out to Kelvin at that moment is and yelling at me, which is what it would be the equivalent,
It makes it worse.
is going to make me yell louder, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
going to make me feel belittled by you because I'm going to know that Ted is right. Ted's yelling at me saying, don't yell at your kids. You know, you're making them feel bad. Da, 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 da. And it's going to make me feel worse because I am conscious enough to know, Ted, that you're right. I should
Right.
bad parenting. And so you're going to make me feel more miserable so that next time I'm going to be even more cruel. So ironically, you can see where the breadcrumbs are going here. The pathway to rehabilitate somebody who has acted hurtfully is to treat them better than they are treating
You. Yeah, I know that.
That's the thing. And it's not turning another cheek, because that's why I put separation there in the list, because you treat them as you would want to be treated, but you have the realistic view of humanity that I talk about, Kelvin being the idealistic realist. Realistic view, that person's not going to change overnight, so you get the heck out of Dodge. But that's if you really want to look at these things from a functional view that's going to work, and it's long term, Susan and Ted, I'm not unrealistic about this. I'm not Pollyanna here, okay? But that's the way. I mean, I'm just simplifying this, because there are other ways that a sociologist who is, it's beyond my pay grade to know how to do this, but would create incentives and so forth and so on. That's why prison, just throwing somebody in prison, does not rehabilitate them. You know, you got to do other things to incentivize somebody to actually change their behavior. But part of that, not all of it, I'm not kumbaya here, okay? Not Pollyanna kumbaya, but you know, part of it has to be not abusing the person more. That's the thing, right?
Right.
That makes the abuser feel more abused, and they're going to make other people feel worse, because for them to feel better, now you've depressed them so much to them to feel, to raise them up more, feel better, they have to do even worse.
Does it do something? Yeah.
Worse abuse. Worse.
Well, it was again, the other thing was this idea of this darkness. When I say darkness, this evil thing that, in person, like from the Christianity point of view, is like, okay, well, he has a demon. That's the devil acting him. That's why Mussolini's acting like that,
Now, see, that's what I'm trying to debunk in what I was saying. That's
right.
Is that there is no, see, because the reason is, and the practical reason why to debunk that, is that it relieves Mussolini of his personal responsibility for his actions. It gives him a hall pass, what I call a hall pass. It gives him a free hall pass. Oh, he can do whatever, because it really wasn't him. It was some other force making him kill people,
Right.
mutilate people, and be the cruel person he was. No, you are responsible for your own actions, and so is he, and so is everybody. And this notion of good and evil is a bad notion. It's incorrect. And it's really bad from a humanities standpoint, because it gives people a hall pass. It says, oh, I didn't do that because I was drunk. It was the evil of alcohol that made me kill the person. That's not a hall pass. You have to live with the responsibility and take the responsibility and have the consequences of the responsibility of whatever that is in the legal system in that country, wherever you are, where
The
you
devil made me do it.
that,
I said the devil made me do it.
yeah, that's a hall pass. That is really a bad message for humanity. It's like, no, each individual is responsible for their own actions, including the belief that the devil made you do it. You chose to believe that.
There you go.
Consequences.
There you go. Yeah.
Right? Even if
Right.
you believe that, then you got consequences nevertheless. Because last I checked, there ain't no personality called the devil going to prison. When you raise that in court as your legal defense, I have not seen the devil go into prison. I've seen Joe Schmo or Joseph go into prison when they raise that defense, right?
Right. I know. That personality, that person goes to prison.
Yeah, exactly. So no, but seriously, that's why I wove that in at the beginning, that of calling it bad. That there's degrees of bad out there. There's not inanimate force of bad or evil
Right.
out there. No, that gives people a hall pass for being irresponsible. No, not good. Anything else before we call it? I know we're getting close to an hour and a half, and I promise to keep these pretty close to the 90 minutes so that we don't go too long. Any other things in the chat room that I did not read that anybody wants to ask? Natalie, did you have questions or anything here? I'm not sure if Natalie's still on. Grace, are you still on from the UK?
Kelvin?
Yes, Natalie, yeah.
Yeah, hi. I just had a quick question. I was just saying, my question was, why does it seem like people who are cruel seem to live longer, and the people who are loving, they seem to pass on? I know, but it,
Where
it
did
always
where did you
seemed
get
that
that?
way.
Where did you get that statistic from?
Well, my mother and I used to talk about it years ago, where we used to say, my mother would tell me a story and say, "Oh my goodness!" And so what's going on now? And they say, "Well, they're still alive after they mistreated all these people, and the people they mistreated are gone." And I would go, "Wow."
Well,
So
okay.
it, yeah,
I'll give you some conjectures on my part, because first of all, caveat is that every situation is unique and individual and different, right?
right,
Every situation is unique and individual and different, and we can't say what that particular scenario was without knowing what the
right,
but one reason why could be misunderstanding by the people who are victimized and being bullied, and not applying the principles that I talked about today in the Transcending Cruelty talk. All right? Okay?
yes,
Could be. And then what do? They internalize what is happening to them. They're being bullied and they internalize it, and then they get sick and they die if they don't understand the principles that I talked about today. And or they don't leave the situation, they stay in that bullying situation. Right? They think for some reason they need to stay in it. Yeah, the bully is going to outlive the person, because the bully has probably had thousands of lifetimes being a bully. You see bullies, they're not bullying for the first. You see really good bullies. They haven't just practiced on you this lifetime. They've been doing this for a long, long time. They're really good at it, and I don't mess with bullies. I leave the situation because I am not a bully. I'm not good at it. They're really good at it. They have honed the skill of bullying. You leave them in your wake. You leave them in your distant past. because just otherwise you just get polluted by them. You don't want to learn how to be a better bully than they are, right? That just means that you got to lower yourself to being as miserable as they are. All right, does that help?
Point. Very good point.
All right,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So Grace asked a question here. When you have your transfer of consciousness experience in this lifetime, where exactly do you want to go? And is there a specific practice or meditation you'll be doing to ensure your soul gets there? No, there's nothing particular I would do or that I suggest anybody do when you die, other than because you're going to go to the other side. Everybody goes to the other side. But what I do get into, which I don't have time because we got to end the session now, but I do get into in the Afterlife series that starts a week from tomorrow, Sunday, January 7th, I do get into this about how to prepare ourselves before we die. How to prepare our consciousness starting now, not like when you're dying, but starting now while you're alive and fully aware and conscious and lucid and everything, how to prepare your consciousness so that when you physically, biologically die and go to the other side, you can make really, really good choices, because your choices don't discontinue all of a sudden. They don't stop when you biologically die. Your mind continues and you still have free will and a myriad of choices to make on the other side after you biologically die. So what can you do? So I increase people's understanding about the afterlife and so forth and so on, so that you don't get fooled by some of the salespeople who are going to knock on your soul's door when you biologically die. And again, that just planting a seed. I talk about what I mean by that in the 6-part series. So I know some of you are signed up for that already, but if you haven't, go to the website, kelvinchin.org, go to the 6-part Afterlife series page and register for the class. It starts every Sunday. It starts a week from tomorrow, January 7th. It goes for 12 weeks, every other weekend. Jolene, did you have a question? Because you had your hand up very early.
Oh no, I don't know if you can hear me or not. Okay, in the beginning I couldn't get on, and when I finally got on, I couldn't hear anything. So I finally figured it out.
Oh, good. Okay, so it was just technology.
Yeah, no, that was at the very. I was saying hello is what I was doing.
Okay, great, good. Hello, Jolene. Good to hear your voice.
Hello. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Great. Well, great to have everybody on.
And hi, Harpo.
Yeah, Heart to Harpo. Yeah, because you know Harpo exactly.
Yes.
I'm going to stop the recording now. Great to have everybody on. And those people who are watching the Facebook Live, I will look at the questions. If there's any questions in the comments, I will answer those. And plus, you can go and ask me more questions there in the future, even after I turn the recording off. The Facebook Live will still be up there on Facebook. So feel free to continue asking questions after you watch the Facebook Live, even though I'm not recording.